Welcome back, friends, and enemies. Okay, so we are going to be doing something a little bit different, but not completely alien to this channel. Tonight, we are going to be doing another story time. I know, I said that the next one was going to be the one about the sex toys in the rainstorm, but I have yet to reach 300 subs to tell that story. And honestly, I may push that one to the back burner since I had another project in mind for that milestone. So you're probably wondering why I decided to do one of these story times now. Well, truth be told, I have been listening to a lot of Scrubs' stories while I work. And for those who don't know, Scrubs was a YouTuber who took different story submissions to tell on his channel. And I was thinking, you know what? I could do that too. I've already told one for my 100 sub special about the bad work environment in the past, and I have quite a few other interesting stories that I could tell down the line. And since I'm no longer dealing with my personal issues through alcohol abuse, you can better understand me, and I don't sound like I'm struggling to stay awake now.
Okay, a bit of a delayed introduction, but welcome, friends and amazing strangers alike. You can probably hear it in my tone, but I'm a little agitated right now because this is the 5th time that I've tried recording this.
We've really come a long way in a short time, haven't we? Anyway, this time I'm going to be talking about how my insane aunt and the rest of her family broke into and destroyed my dead grandpa's house. 'Cause who doesn't love a good old-fashioned story about family drama? Alright, so the story is about an incident that happened nearly 5 years ago, and was the catalyst for why my immediate family has disowned my aunt, uncle, and 2 children. It all started with the unfortunate passing of my grandparents. Something that affected me quite deeply and took me a long time to recover from, even if I didn't realize it at the time. But before we talk about that, I want to give a little bit of backstory on my aunt, who we are just going to be calling Gardulla the Hutt for this story. And if you aren't a Star Wars fan, just Google the name and you will pick up what I'm putting down. Anyway, back when Gardulla first met my uncle, it sounded like the two of them were at odds, arguing with one another, getting into fights. Basically, she was of the mindset that she ruled the relationship with an iron hand. That should have been a red flag from the get-go, but apparently common sense is lost on my uncle. So let's call him Kelso. One night, they ended up having a pretty big fight, and then when Kelso went to go and apologize to Gardulla for whatever happened, even though I'm sure he wasn't the one who instigated it to begin with, he decided to kiss her to make up. Nice gesture, You would think so. But since he apparently married a spawn of Satan, she decided to bite his tongue off. The way I heard the story was that it was hanging on by a thread, and they had to get it stitched up. And some of you are probably saying to yourselves, wow, this guy should have cut his losses and sued. Well, Gardulla was ready for that. After Kelso gets out of the hospital and gets his stitches, apparently Gardulla and her mother had got themselves all lawyered up just in case Kelso or his family would have tried to sue them. Yeah, they were prepared for the worst case scenario, but funny thing is, Kelso never did sue her, or even give her the boot like a reasonable man would. And why he didn't is beyond me. Now, if it were me in that situation, I would have hickory-dickory-dock, dumped my goo, and dropped her off down the block. Preferably in the middle of oncoming traffic. So yeah, my aunt is a psychopath, and looking back on all the times I was petty about some of her actions when I was a child, I'm glad to know that I was justified in my thoughts on her being evil incarnate. Yeah, that time when you were babysitting me and my brother and you took us to McDonald's instead of Burger King, you thought that substandard ass food was good enough for us? Oh, and remember the time you got me a bathing suit for Christmas instead of a new Bionicle back when the Fantoka arc came out? Yeah, that was all the proof that I really needed. I always knew that you were evil, Gardulla. So, fast forward to about 2017, my grandma passes away, and from what I recall, this is where it all started. When the family went to attend her funeral, the one family that was missing there was, you guessed it, Kelso, Gardulla, and their 2 bastards. And if it weren't for all the other demented things that they were getting up to, I think missing your grandma's funeral because you hate her is a pretty good reason to hold a grudge. Yeah, one of my cousins, we're just going to call her Tanya, Tanya got into an argument with my grandma 10 years prior. And she never got over it. Yeah, a decade later and you are still holding a grudge with your immediate family. Oh, this is the best part. You know what the argument was about? This is just ridiculous here. So, my cousin wore contacts, and when she was out for work or some other occasion, I don't remember exactly, one of them either got damaged or lost somehow. So she ends up calling my grandma to see if she could bring her backups, to which my grandma graciously did. I don't know why she didn't just call her own mother. Maybe she was too busy eating babies or something, but when Grandma arrived, she had allegedly said, well, maybe next time you should keep a backup pair in your glove compartment so this doesn't happen again. And this is what she got so enraged over. Okay, first of all, she didn't have to come and bring you a new pair. The fact that she took the time out of her day to do this at all is a generous feat in and of itself. But what's more, she's giving you helpful advice here. What if she hadn't come? You would have been screwed completely. And there is no onus on her to fulfill your request either. Then you have the nerve to hold it over her head nearly a decade later when all she did was try to help you? Classic entitled brat. Look, I'm not going to pretend that I'm above holding grudges. I have a pretty long memory, and I have some people that I wouldn't mind seeing suffer for their sins. But this is your grandmother we're talking about here. Then again, this is a girl who was raised by Chud the Tongue Muncher and Bobby Brown the Ballless. So we can't really expect rational thinking from these people, can we? My other cousin was a piece of work as well. While he wasn't as involved or petty as Tanya was, his actions were still just as worthy of scorn. We'll just call him Cucky. And Cucky's reasons for avoiding the funeral were even more ridiculous. You're probably wondering what could be more ridiculous than holding a 10-year grudge over contacts. Well, try not going to your grandmother's funeral just because you know that your uncle is going to be there and you hate him. So, yeah. Cucky doesn't like my dad. And apparently his reason for skipping out on the funeral was because he didn't want anything to do with him. He didn't want to see him. He didn't want to be in the same room as him. If Dad was going to visit his mother for any reason, he would want to know 2 days in advance just to make sure that he wasn't there. I don't think that my dad would be caught dead trying to pay Gardula a visit, but anyway. How childish does this sound? I mean, call me crazy, but don't you think the fact that your grandmother is dead is enough reason for you to just bury those feelings for the time being? And if you are willing to be this petty, maybe you could just, I don't know, avoid him? What do you even have to hate him for anyway? What, were all those camping trips he took you on too intolerable for you? Did you hate that he wanted to spend quality time with his family? Are you mad that he taught you a few life skills like fishing and swimming? Oh, that just sounds awful. Oh, wait, no. Hold on, I know what's going on here. You just wanted a plausible and less embarrassing excuse, so that you could stay home and make sure that your wife's boyfriend doesn't leave you stuck with a second mistake to raise alongside your first little bastard you had. Oh, Vinny, that's hitting a little below the belt, isn't it? Don't care. I don't care. One of the sweetest old ladies in the world is dead now, and you couldn't bother to pay your respects. Even if all you did was hang around in the basement for the luncheon, at least you would have been there. So, yeah, that was the straw that broke the camel's back for my grandpa. He was pissed. He already didn't like Gardula from the beginning, but after all this other stuff happened with my cousins, he pretty much disowned them all. And rightly so. The only person in the family he allowed to visit was Kelso, his son. Frankly, I wouldn't have been so generous had I been in his shoes. The fact that Kelso never sacked up and straightened his wife and those kids out makes him just as guilty in my eyes. And towards the end of his life, I think my grandpa was finally starting to realize this too. A few years after my grandma's death, Grandpa had many health issues that kept on piling up, and when my parents and Kelso were discussing affairs and such, since they knew that he wasn't going to be around very much longer, he straight up told my uncle that he wasn't going to inherit anything. He wanted to make sure that his wife died first, so that she wouldn't have any control, and once she was out of the picture, then Kelso would have an inheritance. Oh yeah, savage pull from Gramps. Everyone give a little round of applause for the old man. Yeah, and going further beyond that, when he was writing out his will and his lawyer asked him how many grandchildren he had, he only thought to mention my brother and I, never giving a second thought about Tanya or Cucky. So our families were pretty much avoiding one another for the following 2 to 3 years, and then my grandpa also unfortunately passed. So with the preceding drama between my aunt, uncle, cousins, and my immediate family, it only makes sense that they wouldn't show up to his funeral. But they were the first ones to show up with their hands out for inheritance. Does this even surprise you? After all that I have said up till this point, would you really put it past them to pull a stunt like this? You avoid paying your respects to your grandparents, coming up with the most selfish and brainless excuses for your actions, and now you're here rubbing your fingers together like a Scooby-Doo villain. Money!
Look, the money! Money!
Hoping to cash in on the wealth and belongings of a man that you couldn't stand to be around when he was alive, let alone dead? I would say that there's a special place in hell for people like this, but honestly, I think the devil would spit them right back out for being a bit too evil. Now, with my grandpa having written out his will to give my mother control of everything after his passing, you would think, okay, so they're cut off. And there's nothing they could do about it, right? Well, you would be right. But maybe it isn't the best idea to give complete control to a woman who is willing to let her brother have a spare key to her father's home when he's living with a literal psycho. Then again, Mom was also the type of person who thought that emotionally tearing you down was supposed to toughen you up, and that forcing you to participate in activities that you hated, while simultaneously belittling your own interests, wouldn't make you grow up with a dependency on alcohol and occasionally make you feel the need to stick a gun in your mouth. Those are stories for another time, but the bottom line is that she never had the best judgment. So yeah, she did that. She gave Kelso a key to the house in spite of everyone else saying that it was a bad idea. And now he had free reign of the place to hunt down any loose change. And this bonehead thought that the attic of all places was a good place to start. Yeah, after the funeral, about a few days later, we went to my grandparents' house to do some tidying up and get some things out of the house because my mom was looking to get it out on the market. So while we're all working on trying to get stuff moved out, my uncle is scrambling to get into the attic. He had to be the first one up there before anyone else. And he's checking all the walls and beams, thinking that this 87-year-old man was hiding money all over his home. Yeah, he was convinced that my grandpa was taking lessons from Secondhand Lions. Also, quick side note, go watch Secondhand Lions. Great movie, and it's a very relatable dynamic between my family and the families in that film. They're stooping low for a quick buck, but this guy was delving into absolute insanity trying to find something to walk away with. Eventually, I guess my mom felt a little bad for him and decided to give him a sizable portion of the money that Grandpa had left behind. All of us thought that this was a terrible idea. Still, there was no talking her out of it. She did decide that she was going to keep this information to herself, though, and not tell her brother until all of the affairs were settled. And if she had, the outcome of the story may have played out a little bit differently than it did. Something else that she decided to keep to herself was the combination of her dad's safe, which was one good decision that she did make. Gotta give credit where credit is due. But it still wasn't enough. A few days later, we decided to take a trip back to the house to continue cleaning, and the first thing that we notice when we get there is that the door is wide open. Well, one of them was, anyway. There were two doors to the house. One was an outer screen door that was left unlocked all the time, and beyond that was a steel door. That was the one that was usually locked, and when we got there, that was left wide open. So when we go into the house, everything looks okay for the most part. The upstairs was completely untouched, but once we checked the basement, it was like a hurricane blew in down there. Things were thrown all over the place. Cabinets were open, there were boxes turned over with the contents spilled all over the floor, pens, pencils, watches, necklaces. All the miscellaneous items that my grandparents kept in the back room were littering the floor. So I was the first one to actually notice all of this, and I went to go and tell my parents. I don't remember what their reactions were exactly, but I'm going to go on a limb and say that they probably weren't too happy about it. So yeah, Gardula and Kelso had been over to the house since my mom had given him a key, and they were both so nonchalant about ransacking the place and looking for valuables, they decided to throw stuff all over the basement floor, leave all the incriminating evidence of their being there, and for the finishing touch, the coup de grace decided to leave the front door unlocked and open for any Tom, Dick, and Harry to waltz right in at their leisure. While I can't say for certain what my parents' reactions were to this, I know for certain that my brother and I were equally pissed about walking in on this. And the two of us took it upon ourselves to clean house. And I mean clean house. Basically, we were taking any high-end items that could have been taken and sold, and we got them out of the house, filling as many bags as possible with anything we could carry. Actually, looking back on it, why there was still stuff like that behind for us to take, and they hadn't tried to sell it when they broke in, just reaffirms my statement about these people being morons. I mean, they were leaving watches and jewelry strewn all over the floor after all. My guess is that they were still looking for the hidden money that didn't exist. And they didn't concern themselves with goods. So yeah, my brother and I are loading up whatever we can into the car, and actually I think a lot of that stuff is still collecting dust around the house. Keep in mind, our goal wasn't to try to capitalize on our grandpa's death. We just wanted to make sure that they weren't able to do so after the way that they disrespected the man. The only thing I actually set out to find in that house for myself was this lamp of a naked lady in a cage that I had seen when I was a child over there. I used to play with it with my gumball machine aliens, and the design always stuck in my head for years and years. I'm probably going to put an image up in the video of what I'm talking about, but it was basically this bronze-colored lamp of a naked caged woman that you could hang from the ceiling. And the wires on the cage would have these openings at the top for oil to trickle down the cage wires. Then it would cycle through the pump in the bottom. I'm sure some of you who are old enough know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to put the image up regardless. Aside from the lamp, the things that were left to me were my grandpa's revolvers, and his dad's service revolver from the Great War. Oh, and his car. Knowing that I was a collector, he specifically had me in mind for the guns. The car I actually did end up selling, though, opting to sell it to my friend Kuro. And I actually have a story about that car as well we could probably tell on a later occasion. I feel like I'm getting a little sidetracked here, though. Instead of going on a tangent about this, I'm sure you're all wondering just how this ordeal ended, and what happened to Kelso and Gardula. Well, sadly enough, they ended up getting a win in the end. Thanks to my mother being too generous for her own good, not only did they end up walking away with a generous sum of money from what Grandpa had left behind, they also ended up taking a bunch of my grandpa's crafts that he made, and decided to resell them in a garage sale. I glossed over this fact earlier, but my grandpa had a hobby of carpentry and would do a lot of woodworking in his shop, creating things like cabinets, birdhouses, and other such items. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that he put effort and love into making, sold at a garage sale for chump change, while the bastard child Honey Boo Boo tried selling brownies and lemonade to make a little extra on the side. Oh, her? Yeah, she's the mistake that I mentioned before, enough said. Well, with that little win there, you think that they would be satisfied, right? Wrong. A few weeks after this was all said and done, my mother ended up getting a long text from Tanya, who was trying to stir the pot yet again and cause division in our family. Too bad the girl's an idiot, because the way that she tried to cause the division was by once again digging up the past. I didn't actually see what the contents of the letter were, but the way that I heard it from my parents was that she had written paragraph after paragraph about how she hated my brother and I, to which I say to you, okay, good, the feeling's mutual. At least I have a soul, you stupid trock. And then she would go on and try to bait my parents into having discourse with one another by bringing up the fact that a long time ago my mom had allegedly said that she would divorce my dad once Grandpa had died. Yeah, empty words that were probably said in the heat of an argument from about 20 years in the past. I'm really sure she's going to go and follow through on that when there's no cause for her to do so. Because that's what a normal person would do, right? You know, the fact that she is this stupid and petty actually makes me feel a little better about my own personal grudges. What a trock. So yeah, that was basically the story about how my disowned family broke in and ransacked my dead grandparents' house, and drove an irreplaceable wedge between our two families. Last time I heard anybody mention anything about them was the last time that I watched The Phantom Menace, and honestly, they deserve to be left forgotten. Hopefully I have kept you all entertained with this story. If I have, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and maybe if this story does well enough, I will try to make these a monthly thing in the future. This channel is still mainly focused on streaming and reviews, but I'm all for branching out and trying to do something different on occasion. And I have quite a few other interesting stories to tell as well. So until that time comes, here endeth the video. Hopefully I will see you all again down the line.